Hi there! In a comment on the previous video, a viewer, Alvarez, suggested a video about the 3D model of the spaceship Unity from the university-based show. And as you already know, I love spaceships. I love space art, I love spaceships, I love space, I love everything about it. So it didn't take a lot to talk me into making this video. For context, let's begin by taking a look at the original Unity model as seen in the Alpha Centauri original intro video. It's a very simple but effective model, with a nicely defined silhouette. There's a bunch of greebles all over the ship to imply detail, and texturing is rudimentary, but good enough considering the final video's resolution. Let's get back to the very first shot of Unity from the game's intro video. This was rendered using an incomplete model. Look there are no struts connecting the radiators to the ship's body. And on the next shot, we get the missing struts, along with their connectors to the ship's body, which even sport a nice grated texture. Do note how each set of radiators gets just a pair of struts. This will be important later. Also note how the Unity in the entirety of the intro video has this huge protruding piece of metal. It should carry the sections with the greenhouse, command bay, armory, etc., but the model was probably not complete before the intro was rendered. Then, on the opening screen of the Alien Crossfire expansion, we finally get to see the complete version of Unity. This version gels nicely with the descriptions in the Journey to Centauri novella, so I presume this was the original vision, and there just wasn't enough time to complete it for the original game's intro. The radiators are now seriously beefed up. Note how each part of the radiator got its own strut, as opposed to just a pair of struts carrying an entire section. Also, we finally get the missing sections with artificial gravity. This version of the ship is the one I used as the main reference for the reimagined one in the university base. Those who follow the project on Patreon will know that I first wanted to make a film based on Alpha Centauri back as a kid in 1999. So here's my first attempt at modeling Unity dated December 99. I started to dabble in 3D sometime in 98, but this was probably my first attempt to model something a bit more complex. Okay, let's fast forward a few decades and finally take a look at the reimagined Unity. This one's a bit more complex. First, let's talk about the technicalities. I've modeled it in Blender. It consists of some 16 million polygons and 430 separate parts. It could definitely be more optimized, but optimization takes time. And my hardware has no problem with this model, so yeah, pick your battles. I made this back in 2023 during pre-production on the first University Base episode, at the time when I probably had the least free time in my life. I started working on it with the plan of using it only for wide shots, so it should have been a medium detail 3D asset, but I got carried away a bit. I love this angle. Let's turn on the artificial gravity. My design goal was to keep the silhouette of the original Unity, but do away with the generic greebles, add a lot of intricate details, and modernize the concept a bit. Material-wise, I wanted it to be lighter. More of a painted metal look, with stark accents. I chose this orange-white scheme with a little dash of blue on the UN logo and the dark thermal tiles on the landing pods. I think it looks nice both on the lit as well as the unlit side. It is very lightly textured, with some procedural textures used for paneling, which should be barely visible in the highlights. The only textures really of note are the ship's name and the UN logo. The radiators also have a nice orange emission texture. Let's go to the front of the ship. This updated Unity replenishes its fuel with a deployable magnetic scoop at the front of the ship. In the middle of its voyage, the ship turns and uses the engine to brake, with the fuel reserves topped out. Of course, the scoop is no longer in function during braking, so the fuel is no longer replenishing. This is the scoop in its fully open position. As it can also close, it is rigged for animation. A simple rig also rotates the crew quarters and the landing pod assembly. The rationale behind placing the main communications antenna vis-à-vis the crew quarters is to have it easily accessible and repairable. We can imagine there's a shaft with an elevator on the inside there. Also, the antenna is placed just high enough so that the landing pods don't interfere with the signal. The landing pod assembly carries 8 landing pods. Spoiler alert, only 7 reach the planet. I will definitely add additional details to this section for episode 5, because we'll get quite up close and personal with the landing pods in that one. Oh, and guess what these are? If you thought of supply pods, bingo! A bunch of supply pods which canonically get seeded all over the planet. And here we have the radiators. I just get a warm and fuzzy feeling when I see these in spaceship designs. Realistically, this should probably be bigger, or there should be more of them. But when I tried it out, it messed up the silhouette and looked a bit ridiculous. Hey, if Stanley Kubrick removed the radiators altogether from Discovery 1's design in 2001, I can trim them just a bit here. Back to the magnetic scoop at the front. One of the sources of inspiration is the wonderful Alpha Centauri GURPS book, which mentions Unity's Bassard ramjet. This made sense to me, and it looks cool, so I incorporated it into this new design. Oh, and by the way, the GURPS book has some inconsistencies with regards to the canonical story presented in Journey to Centauri novella. For example, it mentions July 2060 as Unity's launch date, while the novella places it 2 days before Prohor Zakharov's 66th birthday. Alpha Centauri's official website stated his birth date to be September 16, 1994. So that would make September 14, 2060 Unity's official launch date. All that to say that for University Base I'm only taking Journey to Centauri novella, material from the official website, and the game itself as canon. Everything else can be used as a source of inspiration from which I can pick and choose. And that's it for now. I do have a plan to make a more in-universe tour of Unity in the form of a special University Base episode, but that's still some ways off. Suffice it to say, we won't be done with Unity even after the crash. In the meantime, if you'd like me to talk about anything specific, or you'd just like to say hi, please do so in the comments. Now back to making more University Base. Bye!